Hello, my name is Pak Chi Lau. I'm a documentary photographer. For the last 40 years, the theme of my work is Chinese migration. I graduated from high school in 1969, and I did not want to work in a factory. My parents borrowed $700 and I went to Canada. It was a ticket to get out of Hong Kong. I was supposed to go to school in Toronto, but I really had no money. I ended up working in a Chinese restaurant kitchen in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Many old-timer Chinese taught me how to cook chop suey, chow mein, wonton soup. Well, they have been there for a century. I often wondered, how did they end up working in that corner of the world? That was the origin of my work. Around 1996, a photojournalist friend, Richard Gwynn, showed me pictures of Cuban Chinese in Havana, Chinatown. I have been in 30-some countries, and I have never heard of a Chinatown in Cuba. Well, with Richard's urging and guiding, we went in April 2009. I was hooked. I went back in July the same year. So here it is. As early as 1860, Chinese laborers were hired to work in sugarcane fields among African slaves in Cuba. They soon established Chinese clan associations in towns wherever there was a large Chinese population. Within decades, they started vegetable farms, grocery stores, laundry business, and restaurants, like most Chinatown in other parts of the world. In Havana, Chinatown, there is only one short block full of restaurants. Most of them sell pizza. Local tells me that under communism, that there are no incentives, no materials, no money, no Chinese chefs, and no freedom. There are a handful of tourists, but I don't see any Chinese. Now most of the Chinese are gone. The neighborhood is no longer showing the signs that there were once Chinese there. You have to look really, really hard, because this closed door means that the Chinese have died off. Kind of desolate and depressing. On the third day, I find some at the Longgong Association. It is a clan association where some old Chinese and their mixed-race descendants get their free meals. They come here every morning, standing in line, and get mostly rice and beans. What is surprising is that they carry containers and put the food in there first. Then they eat the last portion. They need help feeding their family and children. I feel rather depressed to see that these elderly in their 70s and 80s have to live like this. Is this the Cuban Golden Mountain? They say that Cuba is poor. In Chinese homes, there is no soy sauce. There is something wrong in a country that, for Chinese, there is not enough money to buy soy sauce. Since Chinese migration has stopped, there is no more trade industries, import and export businesses. To me, that's regretful. They say 25% of Cuban population have Chinese blood. So I was curious. It turned out that when the Chinese married a Cuban woman, their children would use the Cuban mother's maiden name. In other words, the Chinese would become diluted in a way that the children don't look like Chinese anymore, and they've lost their Chinese last name, and the history of Chinese would be of the past. You would not be able to recognize any trace in the Cuban family after 1 or 2 generations. Quite a few Cuban Chinese families. What impressed me most was how they longed to have a connection with the Chinese family. Some of them cried because they missed their father and their grandfather so much. And they remembered that when they were young, how hard the Chinese fathers and grandfather had worked. Long hours in the grocery store, ironing shirts, washing laundry for the customers. And they remember sending money home to the Chinese families. But because the migration had stopped and no one could speak Chinese, or the Chinese in China don't speak Spanish, they've lost that connection. I feel kind of sad because some of them literally cried. So I used the ancestry photograph and asked them to put that in front of their heart to have their portraits taken. Before Cuba turned communist, Chinatown had a flourishing culture. It had 4 Chinese newspapers, bookstores, tailors, barbecue and noodle shops, banquets with cuisines, 4 theaters, and 4 Cantonese opera troupes touring major cities in Cuba. Well, it had a nightlife like New York City. Let me introduce you to the remaining stars I found in Havana. When I first met Caridad Amarant, I had no idea she was a singer. She was using a toothbrush dipped in kerosene, cleaning off the grease on lead pipes. She got $10 for 100 hours a month. 想問你個名？係咪冇得名啊？何秋蘭。何秋蘭，但係個巴方標。但呢個唔係你唔係姓江嘅？奇怪喎。佢何秋蘭係嘅做戲嘅名。你啊？做戲嘅名。係你做戲嘅名？你真嘅名咧？呀，秋蘭。佢就方秋蘭啊，何秋蘭。何秋蘭。咁但係你爸爸，你唔係跟你爸爸姓嘅咩？唔係嘅，正式爸爸嘅。我唔係正式爸爸。唔係。咁你嘅正式爸爸係邊個啊？我正式爸爸係時出世。喺你出世嘅。佢係。我自細一出世呢幾年嚟嘅爸爸過後。哦。所以嗰個。呢個方標咧就攞嚟做契女。方標咧係1955。方標's Cuban name was Julian. Born in 1905, he loved the Cantonese opera. He learned kung fu action roles in the same class as Quan Duc Hing, the late renowned performer. But his family was not fond of the opera and disapproved of his involvement. He left for Cuba at the age of 19, bringing opera materials by boat halfway across the globe in 1924. He put his spirit into the cultivation of caridad by only speaking Toisan dialect with her. He taught her how to sing in Cantonese at the age of 4. By 9, caridad was performing on stage. She loved it. The opera troupe toured in other Cuban cities, and she made money to have costumes made. The name of the opera is Farewell of Peng Guai. It is a story of a ritual in ancient times, when a girl who is hard to marry out can throw a bouquet to a group of suitors behind her. The lucky man who gets it will be able to marry her. Caridad plays the precious princess of the prime minister, who disapproves of every man who tries, especially Peng Guai, as he is poor. The princess insists on marrying Peng Guai, as he looks at him as it is heaven's arrangement. To her, it will not matter whether he is rich or poor. Meanwhile, the war is drumming afar, and Peng Guai has to serve his country. The princess is missing her man thousands of miles away. Georgina Wong is Caridad's longtime partner in performance. She is Cuban-born of mixed-race parents. She only knows a few Cantonese phrases, but she loves the opera. Here, she plays Peng Guai, the winning suitor, and later the prime minister who denounces her daughter, in 2 different acts. Caridad romanizes the Cantonese lyrics into Spanish in writing. Georgina and her granddaughter try to memorize, but end up reading the strange-sounding lines. In the 1960s, Cuban government officials, by borrowing, took all the opera costumes away in one night and never returned them. With no performances, the opera troops disintegrated soon after. Caridad started working in the hotel industry. Her retirement pension is $10 a month, $6 go to the refrigerator's payment. The time I met her, she couldn't afford the telephone. She was making extra $10 a month cleaning lead types for the last Chinese newspapers. She needed the money to help feed the family. Caridad and Georgina are now 79 years old. It is just amazing that they can still do what you have just seen.
哇，反正跟住就力都滿沒啦，叫我睇就買唔好嘅話。
你喊嚟嘅堆堆話，嗰啲嘢唔能夠收嘅話。
No。唔係我死咗嗰陣時喎，邊個啊？佢冚唪唥唔識。
The reason I made this video is asking you to help invite Caridad and Georgina to come to Hong Kong and China. Let them sing and perform a little bit for you. I want to bring them to Toisan villages of their ancestors, to Guangzhou, where Cantonese opera was born. Let them feel that China thinks about them. Though they have never been in China, yet throughout their lives, they carry such kindred spirits for the Cantonese culture. I hope you will provide the support they need to come. I went to Cuba twice to do documentary work on the Cuban Chinese. I especially want to show the faces of the multiracial Cuban Chinese and their fond memories of their loving relationship with their ancestors. On the theme of Chinese migration, I have two books. One is called The Dreams of the Golden Mountain, and the other one, Flow China. Both of them use photography and texts to describe why the Chinese leave home and how we manage to live in many parts of the world. They are my family stories and the ones of my Chinese compatriots. I hope you will bring Caridad and Georgina to perform for the opening of the exhibition. We will have a fabulous program.
Si a tu ventana llega una paloma, trátala con cariño, que es mi persona. Ay, chinita que sí, hay que darme tu amor. Pero vete, chinita, conmigo, a donde vivo yo.
呢首歌係咪叫做《Paloma》？
Paloma，
我聽過。